hunger, that's famine. You better check twice. He's pretty dirty.
Life in the Wild West was far from glamorous. Survival meant enduring unimaginable hardships, and daily existence was often riddled with discomfort and danger. From filthy, overcrowded towns to brutal hygiene practices, the frontier was a land of grit and grime. Diseases spread like wildfire, and personal care was a rare luxury. Brace yourself as we uncover some of the most disgusting and unsanitary facts about life in the Wild West that will make you appreciate modern comforts like never before. Horrid tobacco odor. The Wild West was a rugged land of cowboys, saloons, and survival. But one habit that stood out was its love for chewing tobacco, a practice that might make modern sensibilities cringe.
No one should take this on as a habit. Any young people who are watching, forget it, don't do it.
Let's dive into the surprising role this unseemly pastime played in the lives of those who tamed the frontier. Chewing tobacco wasn't just a casual indulgence. It was a solution to a genuine problem. Out in the harsh, arid landscapes of the Old West, where daily work stretched from sunrise to sunset, dryness was an ever-present challenge. Water wasn't always accessible, so settlers and cowboys turned to tobacco as an unconventional remedy. The moisture released during chewing kept their mouths hydrated, offering relief in an environment where staying salivated was a minor victory. However, this habit came with a highly visible downside: spitting. The constant chewing produced an excess of saliva, leaving people no choice but to spit. And spit they did. Sidewalks, streets, and even indoor spaces became impromptu spitooning zones, much to the dismay of the squeamish. To combat the mess, establishments of the Wild West had to adapt. Enter the spittoon, a small, bucket-like container designed to catch the endless streams of spit. Banks, saloons, general stores, virtually every public space had spittoons placed at strategic locations. These simple vessels became an essential part of the era's infrastructure, as much a fixture as the wooden doors of the saloon. While chewing tobacco and spitting may have been practical solutions to a harsh lifestyle, the legacy they left behind was as colorful and gritty as the Wild West itself. From dusty trails to bustling saloons, this habit was a testament to how survival sometimes took strange and unsavory forms in one of history's most iconic eras. Frontier outhouses. Life on the American frontier wasn't just about rugged landscapes and thrilling adventures, it was also about enduring the unpleasant necessity of outhouses. These primitive restrooms were essential yet dreaded fixtures, offering a harsh reminder that survival in the wilderness came with significant discomforts. Imagine a deep hole dug into the ground, topped by a rickety wooden structure. This setup was the frontier's answer to modern plumbing. But once the hole filled up, a disturbingly quick process, it was covered, and a new one was dug nearby. Convenience was scarce, and sanitation was practically non-existent. The stench emanating from these outhouses was legendary. The combination of waste and confined wooden walls created an odor so pungent it could make even the toughest frontiersmen wince. Settlers tried to combat the smell by sprinkling lime or lye, but such remedies only offered temporary relief. The foul air remained an inescapable reality. As if the odor wasn't bad enough, these outhouses were magnets for unwanted guests. Bugs, flies buzzed incessantly, landing on everything in sight and spreading germs with reckless abandon. But flies were only the beginning. Black widow spiders often made their homes in the dark corners of these wooden structures. Their venomous presence turned a routine visit into a dangerous gamble. Using a frontier outhouse wasn't just inconvenient, It was a test of courage. Every trip meant confronting overpowering smells, disease-carrying insects, and potentially lethal spiders. For settlers, survival wasn't just about battling harsh weather or wild animals. It was also about enduring the daily ordeal of answering nature's call. Communal towels. In the gritty world of Wild West saloons, whiskey flowed like water, and adventure was always on the menu. The dimly lit bars were alive with the clatter of boots on creaky wooden floors and the unmistakable scent of cheap liquor. Cowboys lined the bar, eagerly awaiting shots of rot-gut whiskey, a fiery blend of questionable spirits guaranteed to ignite the senses. But hidden behind the rugged charm of these iconic watering holes lay a grimy secret: communal towels. Forget modern bar stools and gleaming countertops. Saloons of the Old West had footrails for leaning, and, more intriguingly, hooks lining the bar. These hooks weren't decorative. They held something far less appealing: well-used towels. Now, before you imagine soft, fresh linens, let's set the record straight. They were rough, often damp rags, meant for one specific task: wiping beer foam from thirsty patrons' mouths. After taking a hearty swig, a cowboy would grab the communal towel, swipe away the froth, and toss it back, ready for the next unsuspecting soul. Hygiene wasn't exactly a priority on the frontier. Those towels, shared by dozens of rugged frontiersmen throughout the day, quickly became breeding grounds for every germ imaginable. Without sanitizers or washing machines, they were nothing short of bacterial time bombs. While whiskey might have killed some germs internally, those towels were a different story. Patrons weren't just swapping stories, they were exchanging bacteria, making every drink a risky endeavor. Bedbugs. Imagine you're in the rugged Wild West, surrounded by endless plains, and after a long day of hard labor, you're desperate for sleep. But forget your cozy modern mattress. Your bed is a crude pile of straw and hay. Before you romanticize this rustic setup, brace yourself for a harsh reality. In the Wild West, comfort was a luxury few could afford. A straw bed meant keeping your body off the cold, hard ground, and that was considered a win. Their relentless buzzing was the soundtrack to countless restless nights. Historical accounts paint a grim picture. Rose Pender, a traveler in the late 1800s, recalled, "Bugs abounded, so I got very little rest." Her experience wasn't unique. Many frontiersmen and women endured similar torment. Imagine tossing and turning as lice crawled across your skin, or slapping at mosquitoes in a desperate attempt to salvage some sleep. A peaceful slumber in the Wild West was more of a dream than reality. The battle for clean water. In the Wild West, securing clean water was nothing short of a struggle. Water, the key to survival, was a precious commodity that often slipped through settlers' fingers. The land was harsh, and finding a reliable source of clean water was a constant challenge. One major issue stemmed from upstream homesteads, whose waste often polluted the water for those downstream. Stagnant pools became breeding grounds for flies and insects, which left behind bacteria and filth, contaminating any water a settler could manage to scoop up. It wasn't just inconvenient, it was dangerous. The water you found could be laced with insect residue, making a simple drink a gamble. Some settlers tried to catch rainwater in cisterns, thinking they had found a solution. But this pure water wasn't always so clean. Dust, debris, and other contaminants often found their way into the cisterns, turning the collected rainwater into a risky, impure supply. Personal hygiene, or rather the lack of it, presented another grim reality of frontier life. A bizarre belief prevailed that frequent bathing could harm your health, leaving your pores vulnerable to infections. Many settlers went without a wash for days, weeks, or even longer. In the Wild West, securing clean water was nothing short of a struggle. Water, the key to survival, was a precious commodity that often slipped through settlers' fingers. The land was harsh, and finding a reliable source of clean water was a constant challenge. One major issue stemmed from upstream homesteads, whose waste often polluted the water for those downstream. Stagnant pools became breeding grounds for flies and insects, which left behind bacteria and filth, contaminating any water a settler could manage to scoop up. It wasn't just inconvenient, it was dangerous. The water you found could be laced with insect residue, making a simple drink a gamble. Some settlers tried to catch rainwater in cisterns, thinking they had found a solution. But this pure water wasn't always so clean. Dust, debris, and other contaminants often found their way into the cisterns, turning the collected rainwater into a risky, impure supply. Personal hygiene, or rather the lack of it, presented another grim reality of frontier life. A bizarre belief prevailed that frequent bathing could harm your health, leaving your pores vulnerable to infections. Many settlers went without a wash for days, weeks, or even longer. Imagine wearing the same clothes day after day, your skin caked with dust and sweat. The result? Stubborn fungal infections that thrived in the unclean environment. Water in the Wild West wasn't just about hydration, it was about survival. The dream of running water was just that, only a dream. As the United States expanded westward, most areas lacked even the most basic water infrastructure. Brushing your teeth, bathing, or finding clean drinking water became as elusive as finding a needle in a haystack. In a land where water was as valuable as gold, survival often came down to resourcefulness. For many, clean water was something they couldn't take for granted, and life in the Wild West was marked by an ongoing battle against the elements and the lack of the one thing we need the most: water. Personal hygiene. From 1837 to 1901, personal hygiene was a complicated affair, especially for women. The cumbersome nature of their clothing made it incredibly difficult to use the restroom, creating a unique set of challenges. Women often wore special pantaloons with no crotch, allowing them to hover over toilets. This unusual design, noted by experts like Rose Haybeck from Dusty Old Thing, was just one of many ways women adapted to the demands of hygiene during this era. Before sanitary pads became widely available in 1888, women had to rely on other materials during their menstrual cycles, such as grass, cotton, rabbit fur, rags, or even sheep's wool. The absence of tampons, not introduced until 1931, left many searching for creative solutions to a natural but inconvenient part of life. But hygiene issues weren't just limited to women. Men also faced bizarre and dangerous treatments for their health problems. In 1894, many were persuaded by dubious doctors, like Salt Lake City's Dr. Otterberg, to undergo unnecessary procedures. According to Kate Ringer from the University of Idaho, many physicians at the time believed circumcision was the solution to everything, from epilepsy to mental challenges, and even syphilis. Some even claimed circumcision could cure hysteria in women, a misconception that further perpetuated harmful medical practices.
Once said that hysteria was the waste paper basket of otherwise unemployed medical symptoms.
These strange, misguided ideas about hygiene and medicine reveal just how far we've come in terms of health awareness and proper care. What seemed like the best solutions back then were often based on ignorance and superstition. It wasn't until later that society began to realize the real scientific truths behind hygiene and health, marking the beginning of a more rational, safe approach to personal care. Dust in the Wild West. The Wild West was a place where every step forward came with a cloud of dust. But what if we told you this relentless force of nature didn't just stain your clothes, it could suffocate you? Picture this: cowboys, settlers, and frontier towns suffocating under the weight of dust storms that seemed to never end. It wasn't just an inconvenience, it was a fight for survival. As the winds swept across the vast plains, the dust became a constant, invading every aspect of life. For cowboys on cattle drives, this meant endless clouds of dirt stirred up by massive herds, coating them head to toe, no matter how much they tried to clean up. It was like wearing a permanent layer of grit that never washed off. But it wasn't just the cowboys who felt the sting. In frontier towns, the dust problem was a persistent nightmare. Every wagon wheel turned, and every footstep kicked up clouds of dirt, infiltrating homes, businesses, food, and water. Imagine trying to live in a place where no matter how much you swept or wiped, the dust always returned. It wasn't just annoying, it was relentless. The worst part? The dust wasn't only a nuisance, it posed a deadly health risk. Chronic exposure led to dust lung, a respiratory disease that left settlers and cowboys gasping for breath. A simple cough could turn into a constant struggle for air. The Wild West wasn't just wild in its lawlessness, it was a land where dust could choke you, both literally and figuratively. Soap in the Old West. Meet Frank Clifford, a man with many names, whose first-hand accounts revealed the tough and sometimes shocking realities of life on the frontier. Among the most surprising tidbits he shared, the story of soap, or rather, the lack of it. For most, soap was something out of reach, reserved only for the privileged few, and people had to get inventive with their hygiene. Some of the more resourceful settlers turned to soapweed, a substance extracted from the yucca plant. Clifford himself even used the root of the yucca to wash his hair. The results were shocking. Soft, clean, and surprisingly lustrous hair.
So I'm going to say a few words in Navajo to describe. Now, your hair is seed.
Who would have thought that a humble plant root could work such magic? But for the majority of frontier folk, the only option was a concoction of animal fat, lye, and water. Not exactly the gentle, soothing soaps we're used to today. This homemade mix could leave skin feeling rough, almost as if it had been scrubbed by a sandpaper factory. The frontier wasn't exactly a place where cleanliness reigned supreme. Body odor was seen as a natural part of life. In fact, many believed that being too clean could make you more vulnerable to diseases and germs. That's right, too much soap was thought to be harmful. Imagine that. While we have endless varieties of soap today, settlers were forced to make do with whatever they could find, be it animal fat or yucca roots. The tough, survivalist nature of the American West left little room for luxuries like personal care. The struggles with laundry. Frontier clothing in the Old West was built to last, woven from heavy materials like wool and denim. These garments were tough, but posed a major challenge for settlers. Cleaning them was no easy feat. The long, rugged days of trailblazing and working the land meant laundry took a back seat, and drying clothes was even worse. On chilly days, it could take days for clothes to dry. The harsh, dusty climate only added to the discomfort, leaving garments stiff and rough. A constant reminder of the daily struggle settlers faced. Amid this backdrop, Chinese immigrants became key figures in keeping the frontier's clothes clean. In booming mining towns and rough camps, they set up makeshift laundries to serve miners, cowboys, and laborers who didn't have the luxury of time for a proper wash. For many, hygiene was often an afterthought, overshadowed by the need for survival. One of the most unsettling aspects of frontier life was the use of communal towels. Imagine stepping out of a bath, only to dry off with a towel that had been used by countless others before you. This grim reality was common in saloons, boarding houses, and even private homes. Towels hung on nails or racks, growing filthier throughout the day. As Arizona historian Marshall Trimble notes in True West magazine, not only were plates and cups shared, but so were these towels, used by patrons wiping the beer from their mustaches at the bar.
I grew up in a small town, smaller than even Kingman, although we called Kingman undeveloped West Ash Fork.
With limited water supply and the labor-intensive nature of laundry, towels went unwashed for long stretches of time. As a result, they became a breeding ground for bacteria, spreading colds and more severe infections across establishments. Some towels were used until they were virtually unusable, only being replaced when they were completely beyond repair. Hygiene took a back seat, and it was a harsh reality for many living in the unforgiving Wild West. The deadly cure for syphilis. In the past, mercury was believed to be the miracle cure for syphilis, a deadly disease that spread like wildfire, striking fear into the hearts of those it touched. Another aspect of the cowboy lifestyle was loosely intimate love affairs that would regularly happen at saloons and other establishments. This meant the unhindered spread of venereal disease such as syphilis, and people, desperate for a solution, turned to the toxic metal in the hopes of stopping the relentless march of the disease. But here's the chilling truth. The treatment was nothing short of a health nightmare. Picture this: daily applications of mercury ointment, sometimes for years on end. The goal was to cure syphilis, but instead, it was like throwing fuel on a fire. The side effects, utterly horrifying, from gruesome ulcers to teeth rotting away, kidney failure, and more. This cure often worsened the very thing it was supposed to fix. It was a brutal and often fatal path that many thought was worth the risk. Mercury, a substance we now associate with thermometers and scientific instruments, was once hailed as a miracle drug. People were so terrified of the disease, so desperate to escape its devastating grip, that they endured unimaginable pain, clinging to the hope that the treatment would work. They didn't just risk their health, they sacrificed it, believing in a treatment that ultimately led to more suffering. This historical horror story begs the question: how could something so obviously toxic be seen as a solution? The answer lies in desperation, fear, and the overwhelming need for survival. Syphilis was a death sentence for many, and in that grim reality, mercury was their last grasp at life. The Wild West's untamed hairstyles. In the Wild West, men didn't just wear long hair, they lived it. Imagine rugged frontiersmen with hair so wild, it told the story of their travels. But it wasn't a fashion choice. It was a testament to the harshness of their lives. These men were constantly on the move, crossing barren lands, fighting off outlaws, and battling the elements. A haircut or a wash. That was a luxury they didn't have time for. Their long, tangled hair became more than just a symbol of neglect. It was a mark of survival. It wasn't about being unkempt. It was about not having the time or resources to maintain it. In fact, the longer the hair, the more it showed how far they had traveled and how little they cared for appearances. But wait, this wasn't the end of the story. Some of the Wild West's most iconic figures also rocked these unruly manes. Men like Wild Bill Hickok and George Armstrong Custer were no strangers to the long hair trend. Custer, not content with just the wild look, took it a step further. He scented his hair with cinnamon oil. Yes, you read that right, cinnamon oil. But don't think the Wild West was all about untamed hair. When these cowboys did roll into town, they took full advantage of civilization's comforts. Haircuts, shaves, and even hot baths were on the menu. These rare moments of luxury weren't just for show. They were a chance to shed the rough edges of life on the frontier. As the 19th century wore on, attitudes started to change. The trend toward long hair faded as practicality began to take over. Some historians claim this shift was a rejection of old ways, while others argue it was simply about convenience. Even figures like Jim Courtwright, the lawman from Texas, kept their long locks, but soon, short hair became the norm. Water conservation and bathing practices. Bathing in the Wild West wasn't the luxury we think of today. In the harsh realities of 19th century frontier life, water was a rare and precious commodity. For settlers and cowboys, getting clean was a laborious and infrequent task, as they lived far from the conveniences of running water. The journey to bathe often started with gathering water from nearby rivers, creeks, or wells, a task that demanded hard work. Once the water was collected, it had to be heated over an open flame, a time-consuming process that discouraged frequent bathing. As a result, it wasn't unusual for people to go weeks or even months without a full bath. For many, a quick wash of the face and hands was the best they could manage. When the rare full bath occurred, it was typically in a small metal tub filled with water that was used by multiple family members in succession. By the time the last person bathed, the water was murky and far from refreshing, but there was little choice. Wasting water wasn't an option. Hygiene took a back seat to survival. In larger towns by the late 1800s, public bathhouses began to emerge. For a small fee, a miner or laborer could soak in a tub filled with hot water, the cleanest bath they might have all year. However, bathhouses were rare, and most people were left to create their own makeshift setups. Hair care in the Wild West posed its own set of challenges. With little access to clean water and grooming products, settlers had to make do. Combs made from animal bones or wood were commonly used to detangle hair and remove lice, a constant problem in the dusty, unsanitary conditions of the frontier. Lice infestations were so rampant that some people chose to shave their heads, especially in the heat of summer. Washing hair was a rare luxury. When settlers washed their hair, they used homemade soap made from animal fat and lye. While effective at removing grime, it could be harsh on the scalp. To combat dryness, settlers sometimes used whiskey or oils like castor oil or grease, hoping to keep their hair manageable. In a time where survival trumped comfort, hygiene practices were as rugged as the land itself. The Wild West demanded resilience, and even basic tasks like bathing and grooming became tests of endurance. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.